So I'd like to continue to the next part of the program. We had the breakout sessions, and a lot of interesting discussion occurred during the breakout sessions. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like for the moderators to come up and give just a synopsis of some of the issues that came up during the breakout sessions. I know in the session that I was in with Norway, there was a lot of issues discussing how the whole system in Norway operates, how to go about looking for sources of support, how does Norway fund its research. I'm sure a lot of similar questions came up, but all I'm looking for is a 5-minute summary of what you think some of the important aspects of the discussions that occurred during your session. And I think there's going to be some overlap, but I think it's important to understand. Now, I asked the foreign reps to come up here as well, so that they're here to address some of the questions that come up, and after each 5-minute presentation, we'll open it up to the audience and see whether any others in the audience have any questions to each of the representatives. So let's start with Germany, and Patrizia Nobi. Can you come up and just give us a little synopsis of what happened during your breakout session?
So obviously a lot has happened. So first again, I'm Patrizia Nobbe, Associate Director of the European Union Studies Center here in the building. Thank you again for organizing this terrific conference, John and his terrific team, and for all the panelists for their contributions. I'm pleased to summarize the results of our breakout session with Dr. Rainer Grulich about the research and education landscape in Germany. Dr. Grulich is director of the German Research Foundation Liaison Office for North America, based in Washington and in New York. You see that in the summary. We had quite a few people attending from all colleges, CCNY, BMCC, Baruch, Bronx Community College, City Tech, also a broad variety of disciplines, who were looking for quite different things, and I think most of them were addressed in the PowerPoint that Dr. Grulich delivered. First of all, to take away, there's a complex carpet of research and science being done in Germany, and there's an extensive funding landscape, even if it's not like covering everything all the time. Commitment to R&D is strong, and they are raising expenditures for research. Plenty of initiatives for research promotion, like the excellence initiatives to promote top-level research, recent Higher Education Pact. Germans are very keen on internationalization, cooperation, and research coordination. And there are plenty of research agreements and collaborations already in place. For instance, high-profile ones between the German Research Foundation, where Dr. Grulich is from, and the NSF, or parts of the NSF. Research in Germany didn't sound too different from other countries. Takes place at universities, often publicly funded. There's also non-university research at well-known institutes and organizations like Max Planck and Fraunhofer. I think most of us know the names. They receive partially public funding, partly private funding. Industrial research is a strong third pillar with the private sector. And research organizations, there are 3 main research organizations that are in support of international cooperation, particularly relevant to international funding. That's the German Research Foundation, Dr. Grulich, the German Academic Exchange Service, many of us have heard of that, I suppose, and the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. So just to briefly summarize them, the German Research Foundation is very central to academic research funding in Germany, and they do it on a budget of over $3 billion a year. The foundation provides financial support for research in higher education, public research institutions, but does not run any research itself. They mainly fund projects, not individuals, but they do that in all disciplines. International collaborations and interchange are possible and desired in all of their programs, and I'll mention a few that Dr. Grulich mentioned in a bit. The second internationalization pillar for German research is the German Academic Exchange Service. It's an organization of German universities and their student bodies devoted to internationalization of German higher education. There are a lot of programs for transatlantic exchange, support students, faculty and researchers across a broad range of disciplines and formats. It's the German Academic Exchange Service. They have a representation office here in New York too, if you're interested. Third, the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. They aim to promote international cultural dialogue and academic exchange, and their research, fellowships and awards enable outstanding scientists and scholars from abroad to complete long-term research stays in Germany. Funding for US researchers, can they directly apply to German agencies? That depends. Organizations like the Humboldt Stiftung do fund foreign individuals directly and specifically for cultural exchange, the DAAD partly too. The German Research Foundation, what we heard most about, supports projects with international partners but it's generally based on the principle of mutual responsibility. So they carry out or support basic research and serve all branches of sciences and humanities. So it should be interesting, the DFG, the German Research Foundation, should be interesting for everyone here. And all of their funding programs generally allow some kind of international component. There are special programs available, such as for an international audience. A small program for the initiation of international cooperation. It seems to be a low-key, low entry-level support mechanism to get you started with bilateral workshops and so on. There's an individual grants program, or there are individual grants programs where researchers with PhD degrees can work on, get support for specific projects if they're hosted at German universities. Now part of that is the Mercator Fellowship Program, which I think was pretty well known here too. There were some changes. You should look into that. Then there is the DFG, the German Research Foundation Research Fellowship, which is catering classically to postdocs. There are temporary positions for principal investigators for excellent postdocs at universities and non-university institutions in Germany. And Dr. Grulich spent some time on international research training groups, which is really, it sounds like a great support, mobility support for PhD students. These are small structured programs at universities for 5 to 10 PhD students or students in a PhD phase. Framed by a common subject. They do research on a common subject. One has they don't fund departments, but like newly developed little research programs that involve a few students. So there's a lot going on. If you didn't attend the breakout session, Dr. Grulich pointed to the comprehensive Research Foundation website, German Research Foundation website for very specific information and searches. German higher education and research organizations are really also very well represented here in New York and in Washington. Here in New York, the DAAD, the German Academic Exchange Service, the German Research Foundation, they all have liaison offices in the building of the German consulate, and they are always happy to take any calls, at least as I found. So that was our session, I suppose. Thank you.
Do you want to add anything to that, Rainer?
I can make two comments maybe. So one is the what you mentioned, the principle of mutual reciprocity. I mean, all our organizations, no, I'm speaking for like my organization, but probably also for at least the European Commission. We spend taxpayers' dollars in a way. That's why the DFG mostly funds projects within Germany. Our funding does not cross borders, and I would assume that is true for most organizations around the world that are responsible for, in the end, to the people what the taxes are spent for. So what we rely on is really on matching funds that American or Canadian or whoever partners out there provide funds from whatever source there is, whether it's the National Science Foundation or whether it's intramural funding, and these are the most common cases. There are a couple of instances where our funding can cross borders, and our European colleague referred to health research this morning, where European funds can cross borders. Same is true for DFG. I mean, if we think of the humanities, for instance, some countries do not provide sufficient funding for the humanities. DFG provides funding for the humanities, and in some cases our funding can cross borders. Then I wanted to briefly mention DFG funds projects that was mentioned earlier. International cooperation is really something that is driven forward by the German Academic Exchange Service and the Alexander von Humboldt Stiftung. So if somebody looks for exchange, not projects, with German partners, then look into these two organizations. And I wanted to also mention that there is a platform which we cooperate with our German partners, DAD, Humboldt, and so on, which is called Research in Germany. There's also a website called research-in-Germany, which provides more comprehensive information on the German research landscape, on the different research funding and performing institutions, has a job platform, a job search platform, and other tools as well.
Okay. So there's a kind of a thematic area here, is that if you're looking for funding, what you need to do is you need to find your collaborators in these countries and be part of the research effort, the research that is being done in many of these countries. There are some funds that can directly come to researchers, but they are small and they are limited. But opening up the opportunities by collaborating with an individual researcher or an individual institution increases your research portfolio and enhances your reputation as well. Keeping in mind that early in your career, these benefits will generate a lot, increase your reputation and increase funding in later years. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to Japan. Lisa Ebert, can you come up and give us a little summary of?
Thank you, John. We had the benefit of Takehiro Fujino, who is the Deputy Director of the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, JSPS, speak to us for about an hour about all kinds of issues relating to research collaborations with the U.S. and other countries as regards Japan. And one of the things that I found really interesting early on was that Japan ranks third in the world in terms of R&D expenditures, behind the USA first and then China. But Japan ranks second in the GDP that they put toward R&D expenditures. So they have a huge commitment to research, and in fact, it's higher than the USA and China. The organizational structure for science funding in Japan comes basically from four places. JSPS is the core funding agency in Japan. And the main form of collaboration is through fellowships and postdoctoral exchanges. There's other organizations called JST, AMED, NATO, and they generally work in the policy and commercialization arena, where JSPS is curiosity-driven, and it's bottom-up, and they get the more funding, almost 2 times as much than the other organizations. The way that funding is determined generally is by a 5-year plan that's done, which every 5 years priorities are identified, science priorities, and resources are allocated based on those priorities. Some of the big sectors that Japan is very interested in is AI, chemistry, physics, and materials science. So those are the areas that are of particular interest. The main way, again, to go about these collaborations are through finding a research partner. And that can be the biggest hurdle to get over, but there are some best practices that were pointed out. For example, JSPS is putting on academic symposiums in Boston and DC. So those would be good to attend. And he also mentioned that, you can apply to NIH, SSRC, and those programs are calling for international collaboration. So you can then reach out to a Japan partner through one of those grants. There was one other thing that I wanted to point out before I turn to our speaker. Sorry. So again, it's mainly through these fellowships, but the fellowships are quite robust, and some of them can pay pretty well, especially for postdocs. So they are based on where you are in your career. They offer fellowships anywhere from 6 years after PhD, mid-career professor, and Nobel Peace level. And this I thought was very important, because it seems like everyone has the same question, and that is, how do I go about building these partnerships and these relationships with researchers in other countries? And there's a resource that JSPS has specifically, and it's called JSPS Net. And that is dedicated to facilitating those kinds of exchanges that could build those partnerships. So I think that's a really, really good takeaway. And I think that's about it, but I'm sure I forgot something. So thank you very much.
Want to add anything to the discussion? Pretty much that summarizes it.
Thank you, Sarah, for a very good summary. There's not so much to be added, but I think the very essential part for international collaboration is the exchange of researchers or human resources. And we have a variety of fellowship programs for inviting US researchers to Japan. As I said, Lisa said, we are making a lot of investment. Japan has been investing a lot on research and development, but I think Japan is still a little bit underrepresented in America and Europe. So I'd like to ask you to, we are holding many events in Washington, D.C. and Boston or other places every year. So if you have a chance, please visit our website, and we are providing information about our events. And if you have time to, please come to our event and have a chance to get to know with Japanese scientists. And if you are interested in collaborating with Japanese scientists, please visit use our fellowship program and get the opportunity to come to Japan, or inviting Japanese researchers to your laboratory. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Anyone have any additional comments or questions about Japan? Okay. Let's move on to Bob Buckley, who's going to talk to us about what occurred in the Minhas presentation on France.
Good afternoon. We were privileged to have Dr. Mina Pham talk to us. We had a group, mostly senior college faculty, with one Fulbright visitor and a community college faculty member. The French system is in many ways, I think, similar to the US system. And with their having had a presidential election this summer, there are uncertainties in funding in the days ahead. But France has a setup that approximates our National Science Foundation, the ANR, and there also is the CNRS. The French have been looking to raise their profile in research in recent years. They have funding at integrated campuses and research technology institutes, research hospitals, labs of excellence. The PhDs and postdocs can receive funding from the Marie Curie Foundation. Again, I will not attempt to pronounce the Polish name. And that's where there are exchanges of, or back and forth between US and France. The European Research Council has grants. They are extremely competitive. The French are involved in joint labs and associated labs. 7 of 35 in the world are in the US. And these involve CNRS and they are in several places in the US. For students, there are Chateaubriand scholarships in STEM and social science and other disciplines. Those are 4 to 9 month awards. There is a French-American doctoral exchange program. There are partnerships for innovation and collaboration. The attempt to bring students to France, 10 to 20 students to France in a year, and also the thematic summer school for US community college students, where 20 students went to France for a week's immersion. Like in the US, in choosing applications for various grants, there are attempts to balance disciplines, and other support certainly helps. The Thomas Jefferson program was started earlier this year, and that also is STEM, social sciences, and interdisciplinary. It's bilateral young scientists, cutting edge projects. Now, young scientists, that means up to 45 years old in most cases. There are 9 projects per year for 2 years. And again, funding, everything's dependent on funding. When the slides become available, there are websites to join the networking event in science and technology where you would be informed of events. I guess one of my favorite things was the French president coming out with the Make Our Planet Great Again. And and Germany has apparently done something similar. It was an excellent presentation, and we thank you.
Just a short comment. I realize how differentiated are the demands from the scientists. I mean, it can be a stay for a few weeks just to meet the good people. It can be long stay for several months. It can be for students or for senior scientists. So I think that what we try to offer is a range of programs that can fit to your precise needs. So we have a range actually of programs, maybe not enough. Of course, the fundings are never enough, but we try to adapt, and whatever demands you have, we will try to sort it out in a way or another. The second point is that I thank you for enlightening this initiative, although the title may be a bit provocative. It means that we will have some additional fundings, and I advertise for that, and Germany has followed also this initiative to offer some possibility for long stay or shorter stay to scientists or to students to come and spend some period of research in France on all fields regarding climate change, environment, energy transition, and this kind of topics, which are more or less in the frame of the Paris Agreement.
So I'd like to invite Dominic up. I was in a session with Norway.
Thank you, John. I'm Dominic Esposito, Director of Sponsored Programs and Research at Baruch College. I moderated the session with Berit Une, a Special Advisor for International Cooperation in the Research Council of Norway. It was a very informative session. Interestingly enough to me, when I see a lot of international presentations, I see the parallels between those organizations and the U.S.-based funding agencies like National Science Foundation. So I found that very interesting. We had faculty from both community and senior colleges there. And the Research Council of Norway is responsible for about 1/3 of the public research funding in Norway. And they fund projects all the way from basic research to innovation to higher education, and some funds are also allocated towards industry. They are under the Ministry of Education and Research, and the funds they receive from the ministry are then distributed through the Research Council. They're the main policy advisor, and they engage in, quote, strategic dialogue with the ministry, which means they try and speak about things like the budget and how the funds are going to be distributed, how the research funds are going to be distributed. Much of the research in Norway is for mining minerals, hydroelectricity, petroleum, fishing, and seafood and shipping. There are they award centers of excellence, innovation, and environmentally friendly energy. The council put a lot of resources towards Horizon 2020, so they're a big proponent of that program. And they fund projects such as renewable energy, geology, petroleum technology, climate change, marine, maritime, clinical medicine, public administration, and Arctic sciences. So a big discussion during the session was about the Arctic science research and the possibility of making connections with one particular researcher here in the U.S. and developing Arctic science research and relating that to an education curriculum. The U.S. is the top country with which Norway co-publishes, led by healthcare, biotechnology, environment, and climate change. Those are the top publications, co-publications. And U.S. is also on the top of the list with the highest number of joint proposals with Norway. Norway has a roadmap to strengthen cooperation with the U.S. on excellence, industry, research and development, educational forums, and European forums and instruments, specific research areas, and social science. Most collaborations are bottom-up, that's initiated with researchers. Starting with the collaboration, but Norway has an international partnership program with the acronym INTPART, which stands for Institutional Partnerships for Excellent Research, Education, and Innovation. But they also have participated in GROW, PIRE, NIH, and Polar research programs which is similar to PIRE and NIH. INPART specifically develops world-class research and education in Norway through international partnerships, and they are in the process of awarding 23 new projects to facilitate international collaboration. So they're very invested in international collaboration. Funding in Norway goes to industry, universities and colleges, institutes, sector, and hospitals in that order as far as the amount of funding that is distributed. And they're happy to facilitate collaboration. Norwegian institutions can apply directly, but if there's a U.S. partner, they must partner with a Norwegian institution first in order to have access to the funding and the resources. The Center for International Education is an organization that facilitates student exchange. So, like I said, a lot of the dialogue was about students and student programs and linking research with education. And that integrates research, and that particular center for international education integrates research and educational activities. And interestingly enough, and John brought up this point, which is always the question we have. How does the future of the funding look for the NSF? We usually hear it's flat. We hear the threats that it's going to be cut and things of that nature. But Norway, in particular, the Research Council is anticipating a steady increase on a year-to-year basis, which is great and is a great way to, very encouraging to form these international partnerships. So I will now hand the floor over to Berit.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I said steady increase. I think I said steady. Because it wasn't, we're happy that we have a large GDP per capita, but so we struggle to get the research funding up at a high percentage of GDP. But that's a luxury problem, I think. It was an excellent recap of what happened in there, I think. Thank you for that. I'd like to comment on the Arctic. Svalbard was the arena for what we discussed in there, and is of course hugely important to Norway as a land, as an archipelago up there in the Arctic, and is a research platform. We're not proud of all the coal mining, so that's reduced all the time. It's turning more and more into research infrastructure. And it is part of the European roadmap for European infrastructure. And it's a very international platform. Second comment is, yes, NSF is stronger than the Research Council in saying research and education should be combined. We have two organizations, and you mentioned the Center for Internationalization of Education. So I'm looking forward to work with anyone in the audience here to facilitate contacts, the right contacts in Norway, if you want to do either more student exchange, develop courses, or research, or combining of those. Thank you.
I asked the question, what is Norway's R&D versus GDP? It says it's only 2%. The reason it's only 2% is because its GDP has increased so rapidly that we can't keep up the research dollars with the GDP. That should be a problem we have, right?
So it was a serious session.
Okay, so Lourdes Torres is going to summarize what occurred during the Spanish presentation.
Thank you, John. And thank you all, and good afternoon. I was honored to be the moderator for a presentation by Dr. David Gonzalez Martinez. I will no way be able to summarize everything that he discussed. I would ask John definitely to circulate that PowerPoint presentation. He gave an excellent presentation. Began by discussing the organizational structure of how the government distributes funds for science and technology. Through his work at the Ministry of Economy, Industry, and Innovation, and through the Secretary of State, Office of the Secretary of State of Research, Development, and Innovation, this is where the funds are distributed through several numerous public research institutes, academic institutions. While I don't recall the exact size of funding made available, they are involved in also coordinating policy and objectives of funding programs and deciding where, in fact, should they put their funds. What should they be funding? And I do want to add that there was a comment made that the objectives of some of these programs, or within the objectives of some of these funded programs, those objectives are clearly aligned with those of the EU Horizon 2020, and I think we discussed that this morning as well. So the funding is distributed through the State Research Agency. Yes, there are many collaborative research activities. Through the State Research Agency, they also fund health-related projects. But I do want to add something that really impressed me. All of the projects and all of the grants that are made, all of those projects need to show some societal impact. Correct? And maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because I was very impressed with that. It's very important, no matter what kind of project it is, what discipline, across disciplines, but they need to show some societal impact. Some of the large active research collaborations that we also discussed this morning, the NSF Materials World Network and the PIRE, are international collaborations that fund science and engineering. There are no specific U.S. PIs that can apply directly to Spain for funding. However, Spain is actively involved in over 50 joint initiatives in the EU and Horizon 2020. And I was also impressed with the fact that all nationalities are invited to participate in their programs, fostering, collaboration among nations in Europe as well as with the United States. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, about the impact. As in the Horizon 2020, we want that the social component of science is embedded in every single project. I know that is difficult to make it in theoretical physics, but we look for this kind of projects. Not directly having a social scientist in the project, but trying to get the frog out of the hole you were saying this morning, no? of his cave, yeah. And I wanted to say that regarding the ERANET, Spain is very active in this ERANET, and I want to open the opportunity of the ARANETs to the US. NSF could be, well, is involved already in a few ARANETs, but they could do more, I think. ARANETs are, it's a table where many funding agencies sit around. We choose a topic to fund, and in this table, to have the US would boost the presence of US researchers in European collaborations. And I think it's a good way of resolving the complexity of multilateral agreements. When the NSF sits down with us, with the NSF pilot program, for example, they have to sign an agreement with every single one of these countries. Joining an ARANET just for the call would be very easy and will have a huge impact, not only for the American researchers, but also for these initiatives themselves, because to have the US on board will actually call for a lot of high-level collaborations, and that is all. Thank you.
So now, let me invite Pauline, who's going to discuss the what happened during the Switzerland, thank you, during the Switzerland presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. It was a very good presentation. My name is Pauline Papoulis. I'm Director of Research and Sponsor Programs at Queen's College. It was a very good presentation given by Dr. Simon Marti, who is the Head of Science, Technology, and Higher Education at the Embassy of Switzerland in the U.S. Switzerland is very much like the U.S. In terms of funding. They do work primarily with the U.S. in 3 fields: science exchange program, and education. The science program particularly focuses on things like biomedical and particle research. The exchange program is something similar to like the Fulbright program that we have, and they do have a Swiss Fulbright program. The education is more focused on what is the term referred to as middle skills. Here, it would be vocational training. So that would be part of the educational training. Switzerland, at the moment, is 1% in the global field. So they do want to collaborate more abroad, and they do want more US participation. They do have about 25% of their student population is from abroad, as well as 50% is from abroad, also from professors at universities. And this is faculty and students that are actually migrating there and studying there and doing and working there. Switzerland is also part of the European Space Agency and CERN, and also part of Horizon 2020. Most of their research is private or industrial, which is about 59%. That's where their performance in research is. About 24% are in universities. 14% of it is abroad, and 14% is their federal government. And small percentage is about 2% of nonprofits. They do fund about $21.5 billion in research in Switzerland, so that money is available. And their biggest contributors and largest research facilities are Google and IBM. So perhaps that would be someplace to look into as well. Their publications with faculty, the highest publications that they do have is in the life sciences, which is about 30%. And they do have, the top 3 would be life sciences, physical, chemical, and earth science, and social and behavioral sciences, which is social and behavioral science is growing consistently. Their focus in research is mostly in STEM, and they do have various opportunities for research. So Switzerland does have a Swiss National Science Foundation, similar to ours, and they do promote research abroad. They have a program called Synergia. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Simon? Sorry. Yes. Synergia? Okay. Synergia, which is to facilitate more collaboration abroad. And they also have Ambizioni, which is another program that they do have. And actually, when I looked it up online, Synergia, actually proposals are going in 12/1/2017. I know it's short notice, but it's coming up. The deadline is coming up. They do have other opportunities for research. So, as I mentioned earlier, the Fulbright program, they do have a Think Swiss, and that is basically an exchange program or a summer program. It's a summer program where they accept a certain number of students, but students from here can't directly apply. They would have to go through the university, and the university would ask funding from the government in order to have the students come there. And they do have the Swiss Government Excellence Scholarship as well, which is something where students from here would actually go there. And the website for that is www.swissemb.org/scitech. Let me see if I'm missing anything else. Okay, mention that. And then we also have the Fulbright program on our end, which kind of crosses from Switzerland to come here as well. So there is a way for us to kind of collaborate that way. The SNSF, the Synergia one, is a collaboration between entities here. It has to be about 2 and 1 entity here, 2 entities there, 1 entity here, and it is a collaboration amongst all 3. And it does fund a pretty good amount of money per year. I forgot what the actual number was. But I believe that is about it. Now, I'm not sure how I summarized it, but thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I have only like one small clarification concerning the Think Swiss program. People can apply directly for the research scholarships, right? And in the case of the Swiss National Science Foundation projects that are open or programs that are open, we have the Synergia, which you mentioned, where one group, research group, can be here, 1, 2, or 3 in Switzerland. But just in general, all project funding from the Swiss National Science Foundation is open for international collaboration. Like 20% of the overall money for each project can go abroad. So currently, we have statistics about the last 5 years. We had, I think, about 470 projects with US involvement. Of course, the degree varies. It's maximum 20% of the money. And I think it's the overall sum of all the 470 programs are about 180 million US dollars. So it is a very open system. That's why also, like faculty-wise, but students and PhD-wise, we have very high percentages of foreigners. Like more than every second PhD student is from abroad currently. Yeah. So as we are a small country, we were always looking outside also and very interested in cooperating with other countries. And another clarification, it is true that IBM and Google are very, very important actors in Switzerland in research, but like traditionally the largest ones are the pharmaceutical industries like Roche and Novartis, but also ABB and Nestle. It's similar as in the US. About 2/3 of all the research funding is from the private sector, and the remaining third from the government. Yeah. I'm happy to answer a question if there is still.
Any questions?
Yeah? How do you mean go through the United States? Like, I mean, if you would apply, if you would be part of a project, you you would have to hand it together, of course, with your partners in Switzerland. There are certain programs where Americans can apply directly, like Ambizione, which was also mentioned by Pauline before. But it's extremely selective, like extremely competitive. There are grants for up to 4 years for researchers from the United States, but that's not taking place here. Then they would go to Switzerland. They could apply to go to Switzerland directly from here, and it's up to 4 years. But it's very well funded if they would do that. I don't recall the exact statistics. I think it is probably around 10 to 15 per year. But it's not like a fix. It's not like a cap. It can be as many as successfully apply. So that's the one direct thing. The other one is travels and exploratory visits. I think you can also apply directly. That's with the Swiss National Science Foundation, and with my home ministry, it is Think Swiss and the Swiss Government Excellence Scholarships, where you can apply directly. But this is more for younger researchers. Yeah. You're welcome.
Any other questions? So you're talking about biotech initiatives in the European Union?
Well, apart from those research and innovation actions funded by the Horizon 2020, you have one. It's BBI, is the Biotechnology Industrial Initiative, and this is composed of industries which propose topics and funding agencies, well, not funding agencies, research institutions, and these are open, they have open calls, so US researchers could participate there. The problem is the funds should be coming from the US. Then you have the Co-Biotech co-funded on it, and in there you have Canadian agencies, and I think there is one American agency, it's not NSF, and they participate in this call for proposals in biotechnology, and they have two different topics. One is basic creative methodologies, and the other one is applied with companies, but it's not really close to US. And in the past, it was the ERA biotechnology, and in that, I think NSF participated in one of the calls. So it's not really close, to my knowledge.
Do you know any recent biotech initiatives at NSF? I know that we've stayed away from the applied side, and biotech is very, very applied. I can't remember anything that we've done.
Most of that goes through USDA, right, the Chief Scientist Office, I think what you're describing. So I think that the ag tech stuff is outside of our mission space.
Yeah. Okay. If there are no other questions, we'll move on to the next presentation. We had the students. Sam provided some advice to students at the student, Edith Gonzalez from the Graduate Center here. We'll summarize the discussion.
Good afternoon, everybody. We were lucky to have Sam Howerton come and speak directly to our students. They got to ask their specific questions about how to get funding through NSF, and also other kinds of general questions about careers outside of academia and in government, in industry. And so it was a very exciting session for them. It was exciting for me because tomorrow I'm giving a workshop for students, for graduate students, on how to actually make your application to the NSF. So if you have students who are interested in applying tomorrow at 1 in the Science Center here on the 4th floor at the GC, I'll be giving a workshop to them on how to actually go through the process of applying to NSF. Sam talked about the different ways that students can get funded through NSF, and the first one that he spoke of is one that's really important and one that I want to emphasize with you, is that they get funded through a PI's project. So their advisor is applying to the NSF, getting funds for the NSF, and has a specific line written into their application that will cover costs for students. So that's one of the main ways that students get funded through the NSF. So now if you have students coming up to you, bugging you about putting in applications for external funding, that might be why. He might cause a revolution around here. Students can also get funded not just at the graduate level, but also at the undergraduate level through programs like the Research Experience for Undergraduate Students. And that was also a way that a lot of the REUs tend to have an international component. So that would be a great way to get students thinking along those lines and making connections early on for international participation in research. Students can get funded directly from NSF through two main programs for graduate students. One is the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, and that is for students who have not completed more than 12 months of graduate research. So all your incoming students, if any of them seem particularly promising, have them give me a call here, and I will help them with their applications. The second mechanism for graduate students to get direct funding is through the doctoral dissertation research improvement grants. The technical aspects of that vary from discipline to discipline and program to program. So as a PI, one of the things that I want to emphasize to you all is, as a student's advisor, you would be the PI on that project. And even if you submitted one last year with a different student, the forms have all changed. A lot of the little technical aspects of that application have changed. So if you have a graduate student who is planning to apply for a doctoral dissertation improvement grant, also please be available before the end of the semester so that we can get everything we need from you well ahead of deadline. So, that's going to be my, I'm going to sing that song forever. So I'm just going to keep going with it. I will be the person hunting you down should you not get your materials to the student before you leave for the semester. I have been known to go to great lengths to track down PI statement letters. So just get used to the sound of my voice. All right. We also talked that another way that PIs can really help their students get funding is to, besides adding a student line to your basic research grants, is also to ask for a supplemental. If you already have an existing NSF grant, put in for some supplemental money. Help those students out. Come on. Also, if you do have a grant such as an REU grant, one of the things that NSF really appreciates is if you draw from a regional student population, not just from your home campus. So think about the other CUNYs too. In the discussions that we have had about just what other opportunities are there for international collaboration and funding for international research at the graduate student level. Sam made some really interesting suggestions, went far afield to answer our students' questions, which I really appreciated. He said that you can begin with professional associations, so expect questions from your graduate students more about your contacts, your networks, what's going on with you in your professional associations, so that they can start drawing in your network too. He suggested contacting the different international embassies to contact the attaché there, the attachés for science there, to look for international opportunities. And to also research federally funded research development centers and see if their research aligns with any of the priorities and research happening at those facilities. So as another place to begin to contact people. And again, my advice to the graduate students is, if you've identified a place, see who on your committee or who your advisors are has a connection there. So they're going to be trying to exploit all of your connections. I'm just putting it out there. Also, that they should be, if they are in between those two graduate student funding opportunities, if they're too far along for a graduate research fellowship, but not far enough along for a doctoral dissertation improvement grant, that there are other things that they can be looking to explore career opportunities, like internships at federal agencies, looking if they're thinking of a non-academic career path, also to work as a government researcher through a couple of different programs like the Presidential Management Fellowship or fellowships through the National Research Council, or through the State Department that has a virtual foreign service internship that you can do research in the comfort of your pajamas from your living room. And I guess he also said that looking further down the road, we were talking about career opportunities post-PhD in government, and one of the things that he mentioned that I thought was really interesting was that to have a preferential application to a government position if you haven't served in the military, because veterans do get a preferential application, excuse me, is to join the Peace Corps and serve in the Peace Corps for 2 years, and then your application will go through the first round of selection. Well, the masses wait to see if you've gotten the job or otherwise succeeded in your application. He mentioned too, excuse me, that the success rate for applications to the NSF range between 5% to 28%. Some of the disciplines here at the GC for our students have a very high success rate. And that falls into the category of excellent mentoring. So if you have students that are interested in applying to NSF for their for their doctoral dissertation research grants, and don't have time right now, or I mean, it's understandable, you might not have time to sit down and go through every aspect of filing this application, I will be willing to come and do a workshop specifically for your students in your discipline for that specific application. You just have to let me know. And my email is egonzalez3@gc.cuny.edu. If you leave the 3 off, it will go to a graduate student who has been here for like 25 years and she doesn't reply to email. And our name is almost exactly the same. So you might think you're reaching me, and you're not. Please put the 3 at the end, and it's Gonzalez with a Z at the end, Gonzalez 3. So that's my plug. I figured since I have a captive audience, I have to throw it out there. So if you want, so our students, all of the information that we've kind of pulled out of Sam will get incorporated into the workshop tomorrow. There's another NSF workshop happening at the end of November. We usually do them twice a year for the dissertation research grants ahead of the January deadline. We do them in the spring ahead of the July deadlines too. So keep it in mind. Thanks. Anything else?
Okay. Last but not least is the presentation by Horizon, I guess the interchange in the dialogue at the Horizon 2020 discussion. Saida Hickman from Lehman College will summarize that discussion.
Good afternoon. Thank you, John. So we had a wonderfully productive and exciting day. I don't know about you, but I thought it was fruitful and I learned quite a bit. I'm anxious to get back to campus and share all this wonderful information with the faculty there. So I had the pleasure and privilege of working with Ms. Victoria Bodnikova. And she shared with us some more of the funding mechanisms under the Horizon 2020, which you've heard about all day, and even as I was listening, it keeps coming up as maybe the major funding thrust or mechanism throughout the EU. And specifically, she talked a little bit about what she shared with us in the morning session, which was the collaborative research projects, as well as the RISE Faculty Student Exchange Program, but we really delve into the European Research Council mechanism, and that ranges from startups to what they call synergy grants. There's a 50% PI commitment to those, and these are very prestigious grants, and they are very sought after. The success rate's about 9 to 12%. And for the most part, the funding is given to the host institution in the European Union. The grant follows the PI, which was interesting. Here in the US, the institution owns the grant. So I thought that was a very interesting departure from our research norm. And so essentially the researcher has the opportunity to pick their host institution. They have the opportunity to develop their own team of individuals that can include postdocs, doctoral students, undergraduate students, and other PI faculty that don't all have to actually spend 50% of their time in the EU, but that is a major requirement. What I liked about this program in general is that it's a bottom-up approach. So, you know, your research, your innovative idea really is the impetus behind these research projects, and I think that was something that really hit home and gave really a broad range of interdisciplinary opportunities as well as just from arts and humanities all the way through the STEM fields. And I think what was important about that was also that there's $77 billion over 7 years invested in this project in a variety of these fellowships and other mechanisms. And what we grappled with in our session is, how does this work for CUNY? Right, so CUNY is its own special, unique entity. And so what we were trying to reconcile was, how could a faculty member who was really interested in this kind of international participation get involved, take advantage, and what did that look like logistically with our teaching loads, with our kinds of sabbatical and scholarship leaves, with our other commitments? We didn't have an answer. But it's something to think about, and so what we thought we would do is encourage you to talk with your chairs, your deans, your administration, and then maybe even as the grants officers, that we could bring this to the attention of, you know, the CUNY Central office, and that we could sort of look at how we could logistically make this possible for our faculty. The other thing that we looked at is how the U.S. Can be more of a partner in terms of hosting some of these wonderful faculty from the EU. And so there were a couple of mechanisms using the Eurex job portal, for instance, where you could post that you wanted to host a researcher at your institution, and by doing that, maybe develop some of these important international relationships that we had talked about. One of the questions that came up, which is of particular interest to faculty at Lehman, I'm sure elsewhere, is sort of, where does social science and humanities fit within this STEM-driven research enterprise, right? And so I was delighted to hear that while it's not always at the forefront, they encourage and have funded many social science and arts and humanities initiatives, consortiums with other European unions, and so that was very encouraging, and I think that would be also very beneficial. Student exchange and faculty exchange and those kinds of relationships could certainly thrive. And I understand also that there is a huge component in terms of the evaluation of these types of projects, and that they happily went from a year to 8 months in terms of the evaluation through the EU for these different types of projects. And so there's a lot of opportunity here, and given that it's so broad and interdisciplinary projects are encouraged, I think it's a great pathway and a great partnership. So I believe that may cover it all, and I'll certainly turn it over to Ms. Granova in order to maybe add some additional comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm not going to take too much of your time because I'm the only one between now and maybe a wonderful cocktail reception that we have out there, so it's always difficult to be the last one. And you've heard me speaking today too much, so the only thing I'm going to say is, when you want to get more information, more details about these projects or parts of Horizon 2020, obviously, first thing I want to say, we don't have enough people within North America or the US that will give specific detailed information about the particular participation, unfortunately. But what we have is something called a BILAT project, which is a bilateral collaboration between the EU and the US. So if you Google BILAT USA 4.0, that's the full name of the project, then you will be able to find a fantastic website where they do give a lot of information about the latest calls, especially they are dealing with the collaborative projects. For individual fellowships, please feel free to contact me for the ERC and the Marie Curie. I will be very happy to answer. If I don't know the answer, I'll get the answer from Brussels and get back to you on that. So these would be the main sources of information for you. And if we don't know within these projects, then we'll find a way how we can connect you to the right people or the national contact points within Europe. Thank you so much.
Questions? Yes.
Sorry, I'm sick. Hi, Monica Seekant here from Bronx Community College. The neurons in my brain cannot save all this information right now, so is it safe to assume we're going to get e-link to the other sessions that I couldn't attend? Some kind of information in electronic?
The slides that were presented will be put on our website.
Yeah, okay.
So you'll have access to them. We'll notify everybody, all the attendees.
Okay.
Everybody who registered will notify you with the material that will be available. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll notify you too. Yeah,
we want to share our
presentation with each other. Absolutely. Good idea. Yes.
So, in fact, my question is more toward. Andrei Jitianu, Liman College. So, more or less, my question is not for you; it's for NSF. My understanding from the panel, it was, okay, we will help you to have a collaboration with our nationals. If you are national institution, NSF will give you part of the money, will support you here inside of United States. You cannot finance me, most of you cannot finance me, send me money to do my work in my lab. So my question is toward NSF more or less. How NSF will create links between you guys and us? So how will give us an instrument to have a mainstream of application toward European units, yes? It's any possibility?
So first of all, I mean, there are some countries that are offering direct funding to U.S. researchers if they're willing to apply. That's number one. Okay,
yes.
So your job is to search for that.
Oh yes, that I know.
Okay,
I'm already
the second thing is that the international program has developed links with every one of these organizations in their international projects. All of these programs that the international program is participating, especially PIRE. PIRE was a big effort on the part of NSF to develop these links, you know, and it has expanded them since I left. So, I mean, I don't want to take credit for what I did, but I have to say that it is moving in the right direction.
Why you left?
Okay?
Why you left?
It may not be moving as fast as you want it to, or as fast as I want it to, but it is moving in the right direction. I'm going to make some concluding comments that will try to address some of your concerns. But I think you have a point. We need to work harder to develop more.
PIRE, it's only one program. Yeah. PIRE, it's only one program. It's not coming every year.
And I know you spoke to me personally about Materials World Network and what you thought about it and how you're upset about the fact that it's been sunsetted.
No. It's not only that program like that. I don't want a specific program. A program which will basically build bridges with European partners.
Right.
Or not only European, Asians. Any partner.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I enjoyed the whole day session. There is a little bit of my experience and comment I want to share with some of you, and I'm hoping that I'm learning enough to influence my own conclusion. I'm in the health care field for 30 years, and I originated from basic science. As I mentioned this morning session, that science is declining among the students and some of the teachers because it is not earning money. In the health field, where I am working for last 20 to 30 years, I have seen that academic and non-academic hospitals in USA, $1 trillion industry, including biopharmaceuticals, they hate research. As soon as someone says that we want to do some research, they make a lot of effort to remove that person from the payment scheme. So that person has to go outside and do research. No research is allowed within the hospital. And it is kind of started from the non-academic hospitals, but then academic hospitals also started it. So the research is very much frowned down upon by the healthcare sector. And then came all the results of innovation from science and pharmaceutical industries into this healthcare field. And people got extremely frustrated and completely, I would say, totally went out of touch of how to take help of all these machines in diagnostics and in patient care. So the main advantage of research is not reaching the workers in health field.
So do you have a specific question?
So the question is that when we are trying to have a lot of effort to build the research back in the private and public sector, I know that it's not going to enter that health sector that easily. There is a big barricade. What can be done to remove that barricade? How the fear of research can be removed from the doctors, from technicians, from the nurses' mind? There is a tremendous burnout there because they are afraid of the research, but they have to use the tools. So only result is burnout. How do we address that?
Well, I guess let me rephrase your question. Your concern is that research and science is not something that people are willing to think positively about. Is that your?
Because they
and that
think
we need to address that issue.
Their money and revenue. It will stop their revenue stream.
I agree with that completely. I think that there have been efforts to try to understand this kind of thinking. In fact, NSF does a survey on the survey of public attitudes towards science, invests a lot of time and effort. The European Union has collected data on this as well. Southern European countries are less likely sometimes to accept science as be less willing to invest in science. Northern European countries are more willing society is more willing to invest in science. But this is an issue is going to be a perennial issue that's going to be around for a while. And I agree that there needs to be a way to address it. At this point, I think we need to end the discussion. I just want to make a few concluding remarks about the wonderful day I experienced with my colleagues here and the rest of you. So we heard a lot about international collaboration. We know that the world is facing many challenges: safe drinking water, clean and sustainable energy, sufficient and equitable distribution of food, technologies to diagnose and improve health, understanding the brain. These are all tackling the origins of the universe, just to mention a few. I mean, these are issues that NSF is taking on. You know, all of these efforts are being funded by, many of them funded by NSF. So but it's easy to understand, to me, how a few individuals alone can't take these issues on. It has to be done collectively. The world needs to work together, okay? And action is really needed on many levels. And the comments that were raised, I think, to some extent, I agree with. I think that we're not doing enough. I think there needs to be more effort in collaborating so that we can address the world's challenges. CUNY as an institution has welcomed students from this city, this country, and from around the world. We need to make sure that we continue to do that and even expand student flows. We need to create an environment that encourages researchers to collaborate with their colleagues around the globe, and creating and advancing support mechanisms for researchers and students at the institutional level, at the state level and at the national level, and just as important, I think, is the international level. Finally, we need to accelerate policies that allow for data sharing, international clinical trials, worldwide partnerships that fund excellence in research. All of this is done with one purpose in mind, is to ease the obstacles and the burdens of students, faculty, students, postdoctoral researchers when they engage in these collaborations. So as researchers, educators, and scientists, we need to understand these grand challenges, because while we understand them, I think we're entering a new era now. We need to confront new challenges. We have in the past been through uncertain times, and together, with the support of society, we'll solve the most pressing problems facing humanity, and we'll make the necessary discoveries that will add to our knowledge and improve our lives that we can not imagine today. I want to make a few acknowledgments today to some of the folks that I've worked with in preparation for this forum. I want to thank my foreign representatives, who have been excellent colleagues in the past, and they continue to do so. I want to thank the City University of New York leadership, both at the Office of Research level and at the CUNY Graduate Center, for providing us with this auditorium and the breakout rooms. This was an excellent centrally located venue that allowed us to host a large number of people. Working with the staff here actually has been a pleasure. I specifically want to thank Harlisha Ham and Hopeton Taylor. I don't even think they're here, but I want to thank them anyway, in absentia. I want to thank my employer, the Research Foundation of CUNY, for recognizing the importance of this effort and subsidizing it. Building international collaborations requires support, encouragement, and opportunities to network and share ideas, and I think we did that today. Thanks to my staff, Ingrid Valentin and Dan Siepman, for taking on this huge challenge. Thanks for the CUNY grants officers who so effectively served as moderators. And finally, thanks to all of you for attending. This was all done in service to you, faculty. We hope you've learned a lot and that you will use it to build and advance your collaborative relationships. So please join us in the concourse lobby for some refreshments and drinks.
And thank you, John. Thank you very much.